Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started because I'm really excited about this interview. Looking at your background, it's like you've done everything that could possibly be done. I mean, I don't know what else there would even be to do. So,
Yeah,
Jessica, I always like to start our interviews with asking our guests to tell us about their journey into early care and education. So,
yeah,
would you share a little bit about yours?
yeah, absolutely. I think I've known I wanted to be a teacher for 100 years. When I was a little girl, I used to pretend to be the teacher and grade everything that was my stuffed animals. My grandparents and parents got locked into being the students in my classroom very often, and so I think that's where it started. I knew in college I wanted to be a teacher, and so got my degree in early education and thought I was going to be probably a kindergarten or a first grade teacher. I knew I was really passionate about young children. And, intermittently throughout taking classes and even when I was done, I went back to what I knew, which was working in preschools. And realizing that segment, that part of education was not getting near the attention it deserved. Um, it was not getting as much, you know, dedication with research. It wasn't getting as much dedication or recognition for the teachers that were spending every day molding the minds of young children when we know, 90% of that brain development is done by the time they're 5 years old. And so for a summer, I went back to work, was kind of in between what I was taking in my college courses and went back to work at a center near my home. And they needed an assistant director for the summer. Somebody was out on maternity leave, so I took that position. And then we were actually being acquired by child development schools at the time. And so I thought, gosh, this is a hard time to leave them. The director at my school had quit at that time, and so I thought I'll step up for a little while. I also had a director that I worked for, and she was just everything I imagined an early educator to be. She
Oh,
really cared about the students. She had a connection with all the families. She cared a lot about her staff, and it really just kind of showed me how important that part of education was. And again, it just wasn't getting the time and attention it deserved for what it represents. And so stepped into the director role, was acquired by this what I consider just huge, monstrous company. And like, you want me to do a profit and loss statement? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just turn in receipts at the end of every week, and someone tells me if I'm doing it right or not.
yeah.
And so that opened up um, the business part of early education. That it so revolves around our families and our children and our teachers, but there's a business aspect that really piqued my interest. And how do you do it well? How do you can have both, right? You can be for profit and be efficient while also having a really high quality early education center. You can have the best things in classrooms, and that results in higher quality teachers and giving them the resources and materials that they need in a classroom in school. So
Yeah.
started that, then eventually worked my way into the quality aspect. While I loved operating one center, I knew that I wanted to touch more than one. And so I had the opportunity to work on the quality side. And so I did a lot of teacher training, which I'm incredibly passionate about, and making sure that the adults know how important their role is. Because a lot of times, early educators today don't come into it with education or a degree. They think, gosh, I'm okay with kids and I've babysat, and maybe I work in my church nursery on Sundays. Like, this is something I could do, and I get off by 6:30 and I don't have to work on the weekends usually. And so I think at that point I realized how important it was to let the people that were interacting with the little people that didn't know how important their job was, that just the impact that they can and should make on our children, and
Yeah.
that impact lasts a lifetime. It doesn't just last that day because you're in a bad mood. And so I got to take on that role, and then rolled into a district manager's role and kind of leveled that out with my experience in quality. And from there became a regional director, um, and then from then went to training and education in kind of a support role, and now I get to oversee the company and in lots of different departments. And it's just every day I get to wake up and think, gosh, how do we make a difference? How do we really impact our school leaders? How do they know how important their job is, and how do we relate that to our families and children in schools?
Yeah, yeah. This is why I was so incredibly happy that you said yes to this interview because my journey is a little bit similar. I kind of took a left turn into regulations at one point, simply because I recognized that opening up my own childcare centers, similar journey to you, loved being the teacher as a child. You know, my poor brother, my poor family, my poor stuffed animals, right? But what was interesting to me was I as a young person opening up my own centers, at one moment I kind of had this realization that I didn't know enough about the business aspect, and I really didn't have what we might call a good network around me to help advise me. So I shut mine down and I journeyed into the world of running a nonprofit. That's a whole nother story. But being kind of in a supporting role in this industry or sector, it keeps me connected to that thing that I love most, which is impacting, young children. And I, like you, I share it's so strange to me that we focus more on higher education and elevating teachers in public school, K through 12 or beyond, but we're not elevating these educators that are working with the youngest minds, setting them up for that journey of success. So I think you and I probably would be BFFs if we lived near each other, and we'll become that over time. But I think there is a lot to be said. I mean, Child Development Schools is lucky to have you because you have sat in all these various roles. So you have that underpinning that some may not have, which is the ability to emphasize or empathize rather with the challenges that they're faced with every day. And so that's where I
Yeah.
kind of want to go with you is would you share with me what do you see as the greatest challenges faced by early education programs in compliance, safety, quality, as the regulations just grow and grow and grow, but how do you stay on top of them? How do you kind of condition in the why behind those regulations and quality practices so that the young people coming into the industry can learn it, can understand it, can get connected with it? What I'm going to be quiet
Yeah.
now, let you talk.
No, I think that's it's a great question. I think this all comes from building the right team and having the right set of people to make sure that you're getting that information where it needs to go. I think for us a few years ago, um, we decided to prioritize government relations and advocacy as part of our mission, that it wasn't just something that we could stand idly by and let regulations happen and go through, that we have a team that whose real job is to run centers or run districts, but that we can also get involved. We can get involved at a community level, at a state level. We're very involved at the federal level at this point, just because we have so many centers. But um, what we've learned is we have to get involved early, and we have to do a lot of educating adults as much as we had kind of set our path to educate young children. The adults are just as important, and I think that's I'm grateful to be in my role because I can elevate all the way up. I can elevate from my experiences. One of my very favorite things to do is to visit schools and spend time with our teachers as well as our directors. We just had our annual conference a couple of months ago, and I get that opportunity where all of our center directors are in one space for several days, but I get to visit with them in small groups and really try to understand where are they at today, what is causing them concern, what do we need to advocate for just to make their lives easier, because our directors have the hardest jobs, and they do in any childcare facility, in my opinion. Our teachers have the immense responsibility to educate our young children, but our adults have to make sure that they are in compliance and that they are safe, knowing what we know today. And we've learned the hard way in some areas where something has happened, but we never use that. We never just pass by those moments. What did we learn from this? What do we need to change? Are there extra safety checks that we need to implement in that same uh, space? Cindy, what we've had to do is say, okay, the center director shouldn't be responsible for these things. These are things that we can take either at a school support level, or we need to elevate to someone else's responsibility so that the director can be more focused on safety, on quality in their classrooms, on making sure that we are compliant. But I think it's all about teamwork. It's about dedication and passion, and making sure that you have the right people. They I very similarly to you, I think about all the things I didn't know and when I learned them, and sometimes in retrospect I think, my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know that sooner or couldn't figure that out earlier. But I think it is about building that network and advocacy groups in each one of your states. There are lots of free opportunities to just go to the Capitol, and we have to educate a lot of times the people that are making the laws, because a lot of times they're either in a space that they no longer have young children, and so they don't understand the struggle of finding early education. And we know that it's, especially with regulations getting harder, with funding getting harder, that
Yeah.
we have less availability for our families today.
Right.
And it is an economic issue. Our families have to go to work. And so I think it's all about just making sure that you're plugged in. There's a lot of free resources out there. I would love to speak to anybody that needs help finding them. We've built a pretty good um, repertoire of places that you can find those things. But it's really about knowing how important your job is and realizing that to me, it's part of our responsibility as early educators to educate the adults that are helping making decisions based on funding, on safety. Almost every state has an open forum before they make a change in regulation, and you need to show up. You have to make sure your voice is heard when we think, that's outrageous, or that's not enough. That's not enough language to protect our children in our centers. And Cindy, I think in the future there's room to have like more guidelines that are similar across states, right? Like
Oh,
regulations are
yeah.
pretty similar, but the vast difference that we have in some states versus others on fall zone and ratios, like why is it safer in one state to have more children than it is in other states? So I think there's areas where we could tone those regulations down to make it where it's still safe for children, but it's getting harder and harder for small providers, and we stand side by side with them and want to do the best thing. There are plenty of children out there. This is not a competition over small providers versus large providers. It's making the best environment for all of our children.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's exactly why I wanted you on this podcast, was because I'm very much aware that child development schools, in fact, I just shared with another colleague of mine that it used to be that no matter where you went in early care and education, you'd run into someone that had worked at kinder care, or you'd worked at, the learning care group, two of the largest providers. Now I'm hard pressed to say, I have to say, it's also child development schools. Everyone has worked at child development schools as well. And
Yeah,
so, child development schools has a legacy of training really good people who are now out sort of planting seeds in smaller education systems as well, and bringing that same high quality perspective and
yeah.
passion to the industry. So kudos to child development schools for,
We have a
you know,
great group, and we've had a
yeah,
great,
yeah,
I'm so grateful when someone does decide to try something else or do something else. And even if you've had people on here that have worked at child development schools in the
yeah,
past on the
yeah,
podcast, and I'm so grateful to still have that network of people. They don't disappear, right? We still all
yeah,
work together and march arm in arm on what needs to happen in the landscape of early education. But we today have an incredibly passionate group of people, and I'm so grateful for every one of them, because we have a large investment. We continue to make that a larger and larger investment on training our teams, on doing train the trainer sessions with our directors and district managers, and and on safety and quality. Quality is such a vital piece of what we do, and it's not just saying the word quality; it's living it every day. One of our team members, Rick, always says we don't want to just do the dog and pony show, and we don't, right? We want to live what's high quality for our children every day, and it doesn't happen, every day everywhere, but it's always part of the mission is making sure that we're making those improvements.
I think compliance is one of those areas that's never complete, it's never perfect, right? You're
Right, exactly. It's
continually
ongoing.
learning, improving, iterating. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you just had all your center directors at a conference and that you love to, get together in small groups. What are some of the things that they're sharing with you, maybe from your most recent conference that maybe surprised you, or you thought, gee, that's still an area that is always challenging. What can we do about it? What were you hearing from, people that are boots on the ground? We're always thankful for them because they're doing the hardest work ever
Right.
in the most impactful moment in families' lives, and I will say this for center directors too. They don't just know the children, they know the family, like they have
Right.
deep relationships with family. They hug a mother who's crying over the child's behavior or something that happened, that they couldn't prevent. So what are you hearing from your center directors?
Yeah, I think there's a wide range of things that we hear from our directors today, and we have a wonderfully. I met individually with a very tenured group, and then kind of a mixture, and then a very new group. And so I think some things never change, and some things are always changing. I think what never changes is, gosh, staffing is hard, right? And it's
Yeah.
hard in different ways today than it was 5 years ago, but it's challenging. It is the constant of who's calling in, who's showing up. You've got your legacy employees that are showing up every single day. And then, it's harder sometimes for our tenured directors to be more flexible with maybe our newer team members and teachers that are coming in. And so
Hmm.
having those conversations and really talking about we've adjusted our strategy and being more flexible for our families, and we think that's really important. It's also important to be as flexible as we can be while still providing continuity of care for children
Right.
in our centers, and that's very challenging, right? Where do we find the balance? Where do we give people some grace, versus saying like you have to show up because these children need a routine and a schedule. And I think that's a little bit unique to early education in that we're not just processing the paperwork, and we're not selling bleach off the shelf. It's we're impacting lives, and so we have to have some continuity in the people that are showing up for our children every day. So staffing, I think, is still the number one complaint. I don't think the staffing market is as challenging as it was maybe right after COVID, right? We can get employees in,
Good.
but it's how do we make sure that we're confident and comfortable that they're ready to be in a classroom with children.
Yeah.
It's retention, right?
Yeah.
I think our directors don't necessarily know until we put it in their face that retention is a problem. You may have a core group of children that are staying, but you have some some flow of
Yeah.
children that aren't staying. And can we narrow it down to one classroom? Can we narrow it down to a certain age group? What is it about their experience? Because that's an incredibly difficult choice as a parent to move your child.
Yeah.
That we have to really hit head on. And some of that is, inconsistent staffing in some of our classrooms. But I think staffing is always number one when we have these conversations. I think we have more data at child development schools, certainly over the last couple of years, than we had previously. And so there's more ways to slice and dice it, which I think sometimes is overwhelming for our directors that we go, well, this is really great, but we could work on this over here, right? And so at the end of the day, we have to take as much of that as we can as a support team, because we want our team to be focused on supporting their classrooms and spending more time with their families. And you're right, Cindy, they know everything about that family. They know if they're having surgery next Thursday, and they're going to be the ones to check in on them. And that's what we want. We want our families to feel confident and comfortable with where they're leaving their children every day. But I think staffing is always going to be number one. Um, there's definitely a challenge in certain areas. I think with families and social media, right? It's gosh, as soon as we're upset about something, instead of years ago we would have just gone in the director's office and had a conversation. We're posting things on social media, and that
Yeah.
is a knife to the heart for directors who have poured their sweat and tears and blood into their school to have 20 people reshare something that probably isn't completely true. And most of the time it's not. It's a version of what that family interpreted.
Yeah.
But it's having confrontational conversations. Our newer generation sometimes isn't as comfortable with having the conversation that's tough, either with the family or with a staff member, and that's hard for them to really understand, like, what can I say and what can't I say.
Yeah.
Um, but I think they do it they do it better than they give themselves credit for. It's just very draining.
I think so too. I think it does drain their energy more than they recognize. And I have yet to ever meet a true provider. Like you might meet someone who's just come into the industry and hasn't figured out that that's really not for them, right? Like, so
Right.
someone new kind of exploring the industry and probably will opt out on their own because they'll find that it's not for them. But anyone who's been in the industry, even a relatively short period of time, they come to the realization very quickly they're either a nurturing, caring person who wants to continue in this industry and therefore is likely to be having a very kind, gentle conversation, even if it's to confront someone on maybe less than stellar performance
Right.
or, something with a parent that didn't go so well. I have yet to meet anyone in this industry that doesn't have that, that truly caring soul. But I do think, and we're seeing this more, and I'm betting that you can speak to this for us. We're seeing quite a bit of, just some burnout, some exhaustion, how do we help, not just inspire them but kind of energize them in their roles. And I ask you this question because I've seen it myself across the nation. Doesn't matter if it's a small center or a very large organization. It's one of those things center directors are talking about. My team seems less energized. How can we help and support them? So I love what you've said before, is that you're trying to take some of the work off of the center director so they can be fully mentally present. So any thoughts on strategies for how we do kind of
Yeah.
energize the educators in the centers?
Well, I think everyone has to kind of self-reflect, right? You've got to do some soul searching and some question asking, and be ready for some of the harsh realities and the things that you hear, and be ready to act on them. And so um, I think that's the first step, is any provider has to really look at themselves and listen to their employees, and whether you do anonymous surveys or you have roundtables, or whatever it is that people are comfortable truly speaking up and having a conversation and not defending yourself immediately. I think that's really hard. Is sometimes there's misinformation out there too, depending on if you're a large center or maybe you're just a small center. And Susie told Johnny down the hallway that I'm getting this PTO and you're not. And I think you're 100% correct in that there's a lot of burnout. I think post COVID, everyone is just mentally exhausted, and we've picked QRIS back up, and stars have been back out, and they're a little bit more harsh maybe than they have been in the past couple of years. And so for providers, um, we talked about compliance a minute ago. We have people, licensors coming in and doing compliance, and maybe they've been in early education, and maybe they never have been before, and they're walking in with their book, and it's hard for our directors to be able to relate, and they want some empathy into what they're doing. But I think first and foremost, our educators and our teachers and our directors, they just want to feel seen. When you walk into a center, you should know the administrators' names, right? And call them by name. They want to feel seen. They want to be recognized for the things that they are doing well. Um, we tried to balance a little bit more with kind of a scorecard model and making sure that we were recognizing our team and celebrating them for things not related to just their financials, but related to their family surveys, related to, positive things families are saying on them on social media or on Google, celebrating them for retention of their families, not just how much revenue did your school bring in, but are you providing a high quality environment for families and for staff, and just figuring out how you as an organization, whether you're small and that results in a Sonic drink or a token or something that they can add to their badge.
Yeah.
Handwritten notes go such a long way, I find. And when I visit a school and, and just say, wow, like that was a really impactful school, just writing it down. We find one of our leaders, Tammy, really implemented last year that we make a list of things we should celebrate, and all of the leadership team has to reach out by phone or by handwritten note. Like it's not just an
I love it.
email. You're going to make this personal and really celebrate people for the good things that they're doing. And so, I think they have to feel seen. They have to feel supported. They have to feel a part of something bigger, and not meaning a multi-unit childcare organization, but the work we do is mission based. We
Yeah.
make an impact on children for the rest of their lives. And until you can embed that in your culture and people understand that's what they're a part of, they think they're just here for a job. And
Yeah.
so you have to make the connection for them of that we are part of something bigger. We're part of a mission, to better early education, to better lifelong learning. It's not just about their first 5 years, but it starts the moment we have them. And we only have them for a certain moment in time. And so we don't have time for our directors to have a bad day or our teachers to have a bad day, because every moment that we have with those children counts.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said, Jessica. And I love the idea of the scorecard. Like you said, at least a scorecard then feels like I'm going to hear some of the things that I'm doing really well. I might hear some things that I'm kind of growing in. I'm getting there. And then I might hear some things that aren't necessarily the easiest to hear, but at least there's
Right.
a blend. I'm not just hearing where I quote unquote failed. And I like to say all the time I've gotten very used to failing, and I try to fail really really fast.
Fail
But
fast,
the
learn from
trick
it.
to failing fast really isn't about the failing part. I'm finding out it's really how quick can you recover? How quick can
Yeah,
you
it's what
just
did
get
you
right back
learn?
up and try something else?
That's
And
right. And I think we do that really probably faster than a lot of people want to. I definitely have that same mentality, Cindy, of like, well, that didn't work.
uh,
And the
let's
only option
scrap
is
it,
try something
try again.
else, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
tried. This is what
yeah.
we learned from it. What did we walk away from? We didn't learn. You have to learn something from it. What did we learn that didn't work well, or this portion of it worked? Um, and then I think just listening to the team around you and actually wanting an answer is such a big part of that. Is we don't know everything, right? I know what my experience has been. I know what I hear from our center directors, but more importantly than any of that is, I'm not running one school today. I don't, it's different than it was many, many years ago when I did it. And so, what is that experience today? And are we listening? Are we learning? Are we asking our team, what do you need? What do you need to be successful?
Yeah.
And what parts of that can we bring to life?
What are some examples of things that you're hearing from the team? Like if they say, I need, is it more materials? Is it new materials? Is it I need a greater amount of time to do preparation? What are some of those?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's such a it's very different center by center. But what we did learn in some of those small groups in at conference and through other venues and last year is we learned we're sending too many dang emails. There's just you guys because we have such a dedicated support team and they want to be so helpful, they send a lot of emails and reminders. And so we decided last year, like we have to figure out a way to consolidate that. And we have to consult, like every department needs to send it to our communications director by a certain day, and that information will go out at one time. And if you miss the deadline, then you're just out of luck until next time, unless it is a 911 emergency.
Yeah.
So we started trying to gatekeep a little bit more because we heard that they needed more time. Like, let's gatekeep their time a
Yeah.
little bit and figure out what's the best way. We also started picking up the phone again, right? And so I
Good
kept
for
hearing
you.
from our support teams like, well, they're not responding to my email. I told them. It's like, oh, we have these phones. And we have the best school support team, and they're so passionate about making sure that we show up and that we make our field teams feel supported. And I know in my
Uh-oh.
feels a little different.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I don't know what happened right
I
there.
don't know either. Might have a little internet hiccup, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah, but I would say like we've just continued to evolve and learn, and we have the best teams on both sides, and everyone just we built the culture of you have to listen and not be defensive and make sure that we're really adjusting to what the needs are today. So we are hearing in certain areas it's not as many that we need more materials because we do budget that out, and a lot of the COVID funding, right? We use that to update and have quality materials in our classrooms. Time is a big one. I need more dedicated time to spend with my teachers. Um, I need more staff still in some areas. Like there are areas where we don't battle that as much today, but there are certainly areas still today where we're battling the need for teachers and high quality teachers. Um, I think there's a need and a want to understand what the pathway is for early education. Some people are just incredibly dedicated to being that amazing 2-year-old teacher and impacting as many children as possible. And then some people want to understand is there a path where I can continue to grow in my early education journey and maybe join a support team. And so our best, finds have absolutely been within our schools to join our education team or our quality teams. Um, but more than anything, I think it's training. We hear that all the time. More and more people want training. They really do crave it. And so providing that internally, but also giving them resources because there are great networks of early educators in our communities
yeah.
that we can use and we can come together uh, and learn and understand how do we move forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Great answers, Jessica. I mean, I could talk to you all day long because it just really we see the good work from the backside of things, the great work that you're doing. Your team is amazing and you can tell the passion is there. And so we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your insights. And we'll continue to just, invite you back whenever you have chance or
yeah,
time to come
love
and
that.
share more with us because we love connecting with child development schools. Let me kind of round out our thought process here by asking you, do you have a personal mantra, philosophy, motto that you live by, or an inspirational quote that just resonates with you and likely will resonate with the rest of our listening audience?
It's a great question. Gosh, I have so many. I listen to so many audio books on leadership and early education. Um, I think I guess the biggest one is probably the golden rule that we live by here is just treating others how you want to be treated and better than that, right? Sometimes called the platinum rule, treat them better than what you want to be treated. And I think that it goes so much to our culture of school support's not on one side and the field team's not on the other side, but we're all one team and one unit.
Mm,
And that goes directly into our schools and our centers as well, that we have to show up and support one another because the only people that suffer when we don't are the children in our care.
yeah, and it's that servant mindset, right? That
Mhm.
servant leadership.
Absolutely.
I love that. I think you nailed it right there because I think it's a common theme, I think, for
Yeah,
early education
absolutely.
systems to want to serve the team that's around them so that the educators can serve the children, right? So
Absolutely.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thoughts.